Daniel Edgar Sickles is known mostly for his involvement as Major General during the Battle of Gettysburg. He is widely recognized to be a prominent political figure that has quite the controversial background and risked the entire outcome of the American Civil War. Sickles was born in New York City on March 4th, 1819. He was born into a wealthy family which had strict values of wealth and law. Inheriting the same ethics as his parents, Sickles followed suit into his father's career path by beginning his academic career studying law at the University of the City of New York. This admiration for law started a fire inside of Sickles, who soon began to get into diplomacy and politics. After a smooth few years into his political career, he was elected member of the New York State Assembly in 1847. For Sickles, this was a colossal milestone. He was now officially a part of the New York State Legislature and soon to be a part of Congress. Around this time, Sickles began to fall in love, and against all odds, had engaged to his future wife, Teresa Begoli. Despite disapproval on the sides of both families, Sickles and Teresa would get married in the autumn of 1852. Teresa was seen as quite intelligent and mature for her age, even being able to fluently speak 5 different languages in spite of being only 15. Regardless of their marriage, Sickles lacked loyalty to his now wife and began actively cheating on her. After years of abuse and public humiliation, Teresa openly began having an affair in retaliation. When she was caught on February 27, 1859, Sickles blatantly shot and killed the man his wife had been seeing, Philip Barton Key II, on Lafayette Square, across the street from the White House. After being brought in for murder, the court ruled Sickles was temporarily driven insane by his wife's infidelity. This was the first ever case in American history where this defense was made, and he was ultimately released without any charges. While the two both publicly forgave each other, the public's opinion of Sickles drastically decreased. Not because of the murder, but because he ended up forgiving his wife. In April of 1861, the eruption of the American Civil War created an opportunity for Sickles to regain his public image. Knowing the Confederates were pushing through the Union territory and threatening Washington, he made it his mission to become a better man. While Sickles was still actively cheating on his wife, he tried to spend as much time as possible with his family. Despite this, he knew being a family man wouldn't be enough to regain the trust and respect he lost from the American people. So he took advantage of the rising tension of national conflict to begin recruiting soldiers to fight in the American Civil War. Although he lacked any type of military experience and only ever had a career in law and politics, he became known as the recruitment savant. He was so successful at convincing the masses to fight for the cause that he began to gain a genuine following. Sickles even gained the attention of President Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln would later commend Sickles for his diligent work in recruiting soldiers to the war effort. With this commendation, Sickles' career would be hoisted from that of a simple politician to an officer in the Union Army. Although he had military connections through acquaintances, the choice to promote Sickles to Major General within the Grand Army of the Potomac was subject to contention. No doubt to say, this is thoroughly justified, as on July 1st, 1863, Sickles' direct insubordination nearly caused the Union to lose the Battle of Gettysburg before the conflict had even began. Before the climax of the battle, Sickles was given orders by Union General George Meade to post up on the west side of Little Round Top, where he and the Third Corps would have an advantageous position. However, Sickles was seeking the high ground and thus disobeyed orders to move the Third Corps, extending his line to the Peach Orchard and up by Emmitsburg Road. While this move temporarily disrupted the Confederate attacks and allowed the Union to hold the position known as the Wheat Field, it also exposed Sickles' men to devastating Confederate fire from both flanks. This position forged an oversight and created a gap in the Union line, which the Confederates were quick to exploit. Despite this, Sickles refused to retreat and instead continued to hold his position until reinforcements arrived. Sickles' disobedience of orders and reckless disregard for his men's safety caused an unnecessary amount of risk, as this mistake from an inexperienced politician resulted in heavy casualties and the suffrage of hundreds of men. While being overrun by the force of the Confederates and forced to retreat, a well-placed cannon shot demolished Sickles' right leg. Despite inflicting a major injury, he refused to leave the field and continued to direct his troops until the end of the day's fighting. On July 2nd, the Union was able to stand its ground and repel the Confederates from their ongoing siege. This turning point of the war was enough to excel the Union into its ultimate victory, which eventually led to the freedom of the slaves. In fact, it was only a month after the battle, on November 19, 1863, where the Gettysburg Address was given. The famous speech, most notable for its starting phrase, "Fourscore and 7 years ago," was the announcement of the Union's impeccable victory and the foreshadowed outlaw of the ownership of slaves. The Bostonian remarked, "The battle itself was less important than the speech." Daniel Sickles remained politically active after the Civil War and served in a number of government roles. From 1865 to 1867, he represented New York in the U.S. Congress and was an outspoken advocate for civil rights and voting rights for African Americans. In 1869, President Ulysses S. Grant selected Sickles as the United States Minister to Spain, and he served in that realm until 1873. Sickles assisted in negotiating a resolution to a crisis between Spain and Peru while he was in Spain, and even tried to improve diplomatic ties between the two nations. Following his return to the country, Sickles got involved in New York politics and held the position of chairperson of the New York State Memorials Commission, which was in charge of commissioning and erecting Civil War memorials all around the state. He also had a significant impact on the establishment of the Gettysburg National Military Park, which contributed to the battlefield preservation as a national landmark. Sickles remained a controversial figure despite his accomplishments, due to his disobedience of orders at Gettysburg and his conflicts with General George Meade during the Civil War. Despite this, he persisted in being a significant character throughout American history. Ultimately, Daniel was given the credit he and his fellow generals deserved, and even received the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions, although it took him 34 years to get it. Daniel Sickles is now remembered for his contribution to the preservation of Civil War history and overall peace treaty ties across the globe. The remainder of Sickles' life was spent in New York City, where he passed away from a brain hemorrhage at the age of 94 on May 3, 1914.